Hi, I'm Buzz Hayes, and I'm the market lead for the Consumer Strategic Industries team at Google, where we develop solutions for the media and entertainment business. And with me today is Greg Maratea from Iron Mountain.
Hi, I'm Greg Maratea. I am the Director of Global Client Solutions at Iron Mountain Media and Archive Services. And we work a lot with Google and Buzz on media and entertainment and media solutions in general.
So today we're going to talk about some pretty exciting stuff we're doing together related to SmartVault. So to get started on that, I thought we would just have a little conversation about the genesis of what Iron Mountain is all about and how we get into the Iron Mountain Entertainment Services and then into where SmartVault came from.
Perfect. Okay, so many people know, but mostly attorneys, what Iron Mountain is, which is a large records management storage company, global footprint, very secure buildings. It's a place where, if you put your paper or other records, it'll be exactly where you left it and you'll get it back to exactly the way you gave it to us. There's a myriad of security and environmental, policies around that. And then this building we're in now is the beginning. This is where entertainment storage and entertainment services had started, which is now Media and Archive Services. Company wanted to get into more and more offerings, so storage for proper environments for physical assets, whether it's videotape, film, audio, or in this case of this building, a private vault where people you may recognize have things like wardrobe or props or sheet music or whatever. And then from there, they realized, assets that we hold are being digitized. Maybe we should offer that, so why extend it down the street or across the country or something like that? Literally in this building, will go up an elevator and be digitized and make a file for whatever the client spec is. So we have all means of old videotape players, basically everything from the late 50s on up. Same for audio. We have film scanning, and we also can do data restoration even and stuff with imaging, which is actually a growth business right now, negatives and prints and that sort of thing. And the next logical step was, why don't we create a digital storage that's equal to what we do in the physical space? And so some place where you can give your file, your data to, it'll be stored properly, securely, and when you need it, it will come back exactly the way you gave it to us, which is SmartVault, which is a product that's in this building physically at the moment, but also developed on GCP.
So you deal with all manner of media, right? I mean,
yes.
Obviously people know about Iron Mountain document services and all the things revolving around that, but there's an awful lot of other formats can you just talk a little bit about the different formats that you support?
Sure. So definitely in terms of document scanning and that sort of stuff, we've got that covered at scale. In this building and in others around the world, we can play back any videotape, pretty much, except for that random 1-inch, I think, which I think we may have one or two of. But we have a 2-inch quad upstairs, right? And fun fact, it requires compressed air, that sort of thing. And then all of the audio, even Nagra, going back to, field recordings and stuff like that. And then we have a cabinet and, capacity for, we have the litmus test is, do you have a jazz drive? Yes, we do. So we have the ability to get to pretty much everything and also to a certain extent remediate. So if you have mold binding, you need something, it needs to be baked to get the last play, that sort of stuff. We have those services as well.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the baking side? Because, we have a lot of media customers with videotape, and especially in the broadcast space, obviously. And baking is a really important part of digitizing these things, but I don't think a lot of people quite understand what's going on.
And people freak out, right?
Totally.
They're in my oven and they think of chocolate chip cookies,
yes.
Right? So,
as they should.
So it is an oven, convection. And basically the reason why you need to do it is because videotape was never really thought of as an archive media or medium. And a lot of stuff that was either shot or still only exists on videotape was before there was an ancillary. There was no home entertainment, less streaming, right? So there's no longevity factor. And that can even go down to the manufacturers of the tape.
Right.
So at a certain point, with the specific formats in particular on the audio side, I'm not 100% sure, but there was like this kind of late 60s well oil based one where the well oil or well glue was used to keep your magnetic stripe connected to your acetate base or your tape base. That starts to give. Or in the case, the most notorious is the 3/4-inch pneumatic tape in the video world, which is odd because I always remember as a dub of the master, but there's a lot of stuff that actually was originated on 3/4-inch, which is kind of like
amazing.
Whatever. But you put it in an oven for about 8 to 10 hours. We have people who know exactly what they're doing. The temperature is not ridiculously high. It's like 105, 110, something like that. But it allows that stuff to kind of come back together in terms of the metal or the magnetic oxide and the tape base, and allows that to play many times one last time.
You get one pass.
You get one pass.
Yeah, I've heard it's sort of equivalent to a dehydrator in a sense.
Exactly.
Right? So you're extracting moisture through heat.
Extracting moisture, you're allowing everything to kind of reform for its last bit and get that play. And I want to say the first time I heard about it, Disney was doing it, but now it's ubiquitous.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating because so much of the world's media still lives on magnetic media.
Yes.
Right? And now what's interesting too is once we get it off videotape, in a lot of cases, it still ends up on a magnetic archive format, right?
Yes,
Can you talk a little bit about the back end of SmartVault? And
so for us, the future is SmartVault on Google Cloud, which we know does not use any tape-based storage. And also with all of the things that you can avail yourself with in terms of virtual machines and in terms of technology for artificial intelligence and that stuff. Our current system has a tape and spinning disk hand in hand, which is the on-prem system. The cloud-based system obviously is all Google, all next level stuff.
Right.
And the basics are a certain amount based on of data, based on retention, based on the statistics, based on the uptime of the drives, all that sort of stuff can be on tape to a certain extent. But that will eventually the machine will say, okay, it's time to retire this and rewrite it, that sort of thing. So we do deal with that as part of the on-premise offering. But just having the mechanism by which the system knows, hey, it's time to migrate this tape, just belies the problem.
Yes.
Right.
Indeed.
So, and when we are able to use the cloud structure, we don't have to worry about that anymore, and we can actually take advantage of the different service levels. Right now, it's kind of one size fits all.
Right.
But the basic premise of the system is to have as much spinning disk access for the user, previews, metadata, search, that sort of thing, with a couple of different storage option, archive layers behind it.
And in terms of those archives, I know everybody has a slightly different policy about this, but especially in Hollywood, they can't leave set until they have 3 copies of everything.
Yes.
And so these retention policies are not also just about the number of copies, but where they are, right? Where they're put. So I assume that you have copies of things in various locations for the same customers, right?
Yes. So whether it's the traditional media asset, it's the protection, master protection, and whatever you would call your working copy, we used to call it dubbing master. So our clients will have adhered to that, and there will be this location, and most likely we have the famous underground mine in Boyers, Pennsylvania, with your geographic separation. We also have Europe. So depending on what their strategy is, they can use that for their traditional media assets. In on-premise SmartVault, we do 2 copies, Hero and Nearline in this building, and geographic separation in the underground. And when our cloud is, at the moment we're doing two data centers, 2 locations for redundancy, with obviously the ability to deploy more,
right?
Just depending on what the client. But we felt it's interesting that our own organization, so Iron Mountain itself has an info security team. They were the ones that led us to, hey, this can be done safely, right? Because the decision to be on premise was a specific security decision. Right. You got into this building and it's kind of a night where you can't park, you can't get out of the parking lot, you can't get into the building, you can't get into where we're at now. So that mindset was around what built the on-premise system. And then those same guys said, no, you can do it in the cloud. And the durability of the cloud storage was such that 2 locations is probably as safe or better than the 3 that we're currently deploying now.
And that's based on the copies that are accessed by SmartVault, but there's still original media. That's yet another copy, right?
Yes,
and so those tend to be all over the place as well.
And we usually recommend, unless a client has a real issue with retaining stuff to that, we suggest that you keep your masters, or you can call down to maybe your protection in your master and dump your dubbing master or something like that. Even if we've done the digitization, we still think that's the best, because who knows what Google may come up with, right?
Exactly.
So you may want to go back to the source tape. But some clients, they're looking to just go file-based and kind of reduce their footprint. But worldwide,
right?
Some of the music organizations we have masters here and in, say, the UK,
right?
So there are multiple copies,
right? Which was always more of a challenge when you had film-based archives, right? And there's only one negative, so you can make a dupe negative, but it's not the negative,
right?
So that created another set of problems, which is, I guess it's still around in terms of having to archive film-based media, but film-based media seems to get digitized very, very quickly because it's part of the post-process, right?
Yeah,
so,
it does.
Yeah, it does. So you talked about the security aspect of developing a system like this. Can you talk a little bit about what went into developing SmartVault at the beginning, just from a security and data integrity standpoint?
Sure.
What were the thought processes around that?
So this division is a pretty significant division for a media and entertainment organization, like size-wise to other service providers, well-funded, pretty large. To a global records management company, it's a niche business. And as such, and these are people who have data centers and hardened outward-facing systems and inventory that controls where really important financials or government records are kept, right? So this is the mindset. So it's cool that you guys are big, and it's cool that you guys know what film is, but you've got to be secure. So that was the initial thing, right? Oh, so you guys want to do this, we're going to help you. And by the way, we're a serious group of people. So that's how it started. And then the basics were threefold. One was making sure there was a vendor that was a grown-up. So our vendor actually came out of the government space, who built the underlying logic and architecture, and who still supported. Two, there had to be redundancy, which is the 3 copies.
Yep.
It is an old school style checksum verification. So checksum on ingest, checksums at various points, and if you're ordering the entire file out, checksum on egress. Obviously, if you're taking a clip, it's going to be different. So there's that kind of, which, as you know, is pretty much what the entertainment industry is most comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then lastly, there's a set of audit controls on the system from the corporate info security team that is pretty diligent. So, and we've had people who questioned us on it back down, right? Like walk into the room as if they knew everything about security and then heard our guys talk about it and go, you're good. But the basics are every week, vulnerability scans. It's very comprehensive. Leads up to a quarterly review and a test score. Never had a critical vulnerability there. Really have only had little, like it's a score from 0 to 100, 70 passing grade. We get 98, 99, 100 all the time. And which we will get, or, those processes are going on in the cloud. Same thing will happen there. And then annually we pay a cybersecurity company to try and hack it. And again, no critical vulnerability. This is normally where I knock on wood, so hopefully there's wood in here. I don't have any doubts, but if you attempt fate like that, you kind of want to knock on wood. But so, and I've asked about how rigorous the penetration test is, the hacking, and it's pretty serious stuff. It's never the same twice, and our security is never. That's one thing you should know, is that the ethos is the same from day one, but what we do is constantly evolving to the thread, right? So there's also things just about where the web service is, just making sure everything is hitting it, like we're keeping track of, that sort of thing.
Now, related to this, can you talk a little bit about Amex and what that brings to the table? Because there's it's fascinating to me, and I think a lot of people aren't really familiar with what this particular tool is.
Yes, and I bet in your entertainment career, the idea of a machine that does what Amex does was like a dream, right? Or like a
So
hope.
cool.
Yes.
So cool. I wish somebody did it.
Right, exactly.
You guys did it.
Yes. So Amex is a system in which we can take a media asset, place it in one spot, and with a click of a button, every side is photographed, which is part of our best practices on digitization anyway. Take a picture of the asset that created the file, and those two things travel together, which again, the metadata itself sometimes is superseded by the people recognizing the handwriting.
Yes.
Or something like that, especially in the music industry. They see two sets of handwriting, they know that there are two mixers on it, or someone punched in, or something like that. So it's not just that it's written and you can transcribe it, but seeing it. So this will take an image of every side, spine, face, all that sort of stuff, stitch it together, and using, AI tools and OCR and that sort of stuff, extract all the metadata from it, and allow the user to have a visual view into their archive. And I'm sure there would be times when you pull a master, because some anniversary, like we're preparing for the 25th anniversary, and you send it to wherever you're going to do the work, and they say this is not the master, but the inventory says it is right there. It's just the original, camera master, whatever. Like, nope, not at all. So this will allow organizations to see into their archive. And very efficiently for everybody involved, and make those decisions on what to keep, what not to keep, or to clarify what they have. So, and that plays very well into everything we do. So not only does it help you know what we're storing for you, but helps you make decisions on what we're doing in the digital services.
And I got to think that it has a role in, one of the problems we have with big broadcast archives is there's a lot of duplication in there.
Yes.
That's hard to identify unless you start to digitize it. So does it apply to the notion of rooting out duplicates?
Yes.
As well?
Yeah.
100%. So that you're not digitizing too much information or
at least when you're in the planning stages, you're not trying to figure out how to do 3 million assets when it might be 1 million, right? Or 1.5 million, which is really a big problem. But once you're in the process, yes, it'll allow you. Your dream scenario is you perfect your catalog and your inventory with Amex, review it, realize what you don't need or what your best candidates are for digitization, and then you go forward and digitize. So yeah, it's just super, or what you don't need to retain. For sure. I mean, like master protection and submaster was always the way to go.
Yep.
So, and that protection never really got touched. It was never supposed to be touched. So that might be the one to use.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know that.
Yes. I would think that handwritten logs and manifests and things are sometimes the only way, right? Because if there was a database, it's probably long since been disassociated or gone, right?
There is a large organization that used to have to toggle over to DOS to get to their inventory, right? So for those of you who don't know, DOS is pre-Windows, right? Like it's pretty old. You have to
talk about old school.
Yeah, you got to click out of like a Windows environment to see what's in the inventory, and it looked pretty old. So yeah,
No, so I did just think that's fascinating because we do have customers with literally millions of videotapes.
Yes.
Right. And some of the question is, where do we start?
Yes.
Sometimes they know, sometimes they're not sure. So I think that's fascinating. Now, on the subject of Smart Vault, so Smart Vault, how long has it been around?
Since about 2013, so 10, 11 years.
10, 11 years. At what point did you start to think that there might be another generation of this?
So we always knew, but we didn't know when.
Okay.
And if you asked 2018, Greg, I would have thought we still had some more time on the on-premise system, but things have accelerated faster. So you always knew that there were a couple of things that would happen. One is that somehow you would be winding up with cloud infrastructure securely, but at the time that notion, clicked, we didn't see the years. And two, you just look at your hardware, right, and there's a point where so we've refreshed it and we put more stuff in and we've changed it and made it better. But there's a certain point where you're going to do an architectural ground up, right? Which I still think is in our future. We did put one of the values that we offer, right? So if you came to us to use Smart Vault, right, you're not worrying about security. You're not worrying about data integrity or redundancy, right? We've got all that kind of baked in as the initial or base offering. And third, we said we'll handle technology upgrades. So we've already done a whole bunch over the years, and we've never gone back to a client and say, hey, guess what? Prices are changed. As a matter of fact, almost nothing gets more expensive in storage, as you know, maybe.
Right.
So we, that's part of it. So we always knew we'd do some hardware refresh, and we always knew we'd be in the cloud. But I would say I had pegged it for starting in 2025, and we'll be well on our way in 2025, way.
Well, it's interesting because we started talking about the possibility of migrating to the cloud a couple of years ago. I think it was even pre-pandemic, I think.
I think that was right when it started.
Right when we started to talk about it. And I'm very happy that we were able to get to that point where we're doing that. Were there any particular challenges did you find in this migration, or what was your experience in migrating from what you had into the cloud version of this?
So technology-wise, few, because everything is newer and faster and better in the cloud. And also, when we had that initial conversation, we couldn't have fathomed that InfoSec would say there's a secure way to do this, right? We thought we'd be pushing them.
Right.
So that part has been low friction. I would say the biggest change is that if you own a system that's on premise, you know pretty much everything about it, and you own it, and there's no fluctuations. Whereas we have machines that will be on sometimes in the cloud and off, and gauging what that looks like is what we're still determining. Actually, what are the metrics or what are the statistics? So that's probably the biggest challenge. Is like, oh, we don't own it. Like, I know our spinning disk array is 100. It's steady state, right? I know that, right? But it's not going to be the same in the cloud. So those are the nuances we're trying to figure out. And then incorporating so the system up above, I say up above because on the 14th floor of this building, is about features about a specific archival approach.
Okay. Now
that we're in the cloud, the features are about more workflows, more other options that we weren't going to necessarily plug in to hardware. So those are not necessarily challenges, but the new things to noodle through.
I see. So from a user experience, talk a little bit about how a content owner who has materials stored in SmartVault interacts with their own content. Are they doing it through an archivist on your side or through their side, or is this direct access to them? What is that experience like?
Direct access, yeah. You can use any of our services, so you can use the SmartVault team if you need some help with something, and we do have an archivist and a premium archiving service that can help you curate or whatever, but it's basically designed about us working with you to figure out your metadata schema, help you. Many times our clients are not very well, like if they're an artist, they've been about music or performing and not technology. So getting what they need to be able to function and search in the system. But then it's as simple as a login. And when you land on that page, it's yours.
Right.
We try and personalize it. Let's get this to look like, have your logo, but not just that, like have some image that really represents the essence of your organization. And a search can be keyword. And if you kind of know where you're going, we build each database to the client's spec, and we help them develop that spec. So you may want to pull down and just search in a type of asset, or you may be a title-based company and just pull down everything for that title. And how that works for you, we work out with you. That's the most effort we put in is getting to know the client and understanding their database needs. But for the user, you go in, you search, you find files, you get your thumbnails, you get metadata, you can choose what's displayed, how little, how much, and you click on it and you can preview it. And if you go a little deeper, you click on it, you can get deeper into the database, you can make notes, that sort of thing.
And how is the metadata part of it curated? Are you using automated systems for that? Is it relying on databases that are provided with the content? Talk a little bit about that.
Both.
Okay.
So for the on-premise system, it's largely human intervention and whatever we can find. We did do some testing with sending material out to be AI enriched, then filtering out the things that were useless or even more useful, filtering in. In the cloud, we're using Vertex and Vision Warehouse. So, if you want to be a strict database client, because it's very straightforward, episodes, seasons, cast list, you don't necessarily need Vertex so much.
Yep.
But if you are an artist or a sports team, summarization, transcription, similarity, that sort of stuff is only in our cloud version, and that's super helpful. Summarization being most helpful of all. And that's where the doors just start to open up for the user. But in the current state, we make sure that if you are coming to us to store your data, we go, okay, what do you got? Okay, I think you might want to pull down on asset type. Now you'll put in your keyword for title or lyric or behind the scenes or concert and get a much, that's kind of what we do.
So it feels very personalized.
It's very personalized.
That's great. Yeah, because I think vast majority of the world is probably not data scientists.
Yeah.
Right? And so when people are looking for things, they're just looking for things that they seem to recall. And one of the most frustrating things I think most people experience when they're digging through archives is knowing something's in there and not being able to find it. Right?
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Because I think in a lot of cases, when people first heard that we were doing this project together, that Google Cloud was going to be sort of back-end services, if you will, for Smart Vault. Most people think of that as some sort of networking and storage layer, which is part of it, of course, but it seems like there's a whole lot more to that. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how that changed the platform?
So immediately the performance in the cloud is different, just way different in a better way. So that was like the immediate, like the first few times I was in there, like, dear goodness, there is a noticeable difference. And I never complained before, but like, it's just robust. And then, so everyone's very much interested in generative AI, even if they're not a data scientist.
Yes.
Right. There seems to be a widespread acceptance of it. And so that's really the game changer, especially for, so let's just take, choose an example. Would you rather be a sports team or a musician who's got 40 years? Like, give me somewhere.
I would love to hear, because, broadcasters, they typically have infrastructure in place. They kind of know how to catalog things. But in the music industry and others, it's a lot of independents that are doing their own thing where they don't have people curating for them. I'm really curious about that side. So maybe the music.
So let's go with the music. Let's take an artist. Okay, so you've been recording for 40 years more. Your archivist is your friend who's also your photographer, right?
Yes.
Who spends many sleepless nights finding something, right? It might have been on a drive or it might actually physically be printed. Right, but they know, right? It was 2006, and it was in Boston, right? So, but being able to employ generative AI or AI in general, you're able to make that person find things much more easier, much more quickly. And even with the on-premise system, like we've had experience where we just realized, oh, you're not going to tell us this, but keywords should be concert, tour. Things that they're just not even thinking about, right? Sure. It's not on the tape net. So, so if you come to us with that, now you're able to pinpoint your searches better. Now you're able to find the proverbial needle in a haystack. Almost every musician has something that they never finished.
Right.
And almost every musician has the night someone came on stage with them. And it was, but finding it, right, really hard.
In hours and hours and hours of footage.
Yeah.
Right.
We did a demo for a client, and going into showing them what we could do with their data, we said, all right, this is the best bet. Like, this is what we'll show them. Yeah. And the keyword we searched on was the word Amsterdam. And every show across multiple tours for Amsterdam came up in the search results. A little thumbnail and snapshot of the tour name, that sort of stuff. And they looked at us and said, that would be 2 weeks worth of work.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
I mean, what they gave us was a box of drives.
Right. That's typical.
Yeah.
Right.
And they weren't like all uniform drives, like they were all over the map. But being able to cultivate, use tools, curate, you can make that a simple search for them. So that's probably the prime example. And then with others, it's distinguishing something as a document, identifying handwritten versus typed. Like these things are helpful to our.
Yeah, I mean, handwriting is such an important part of all this, right? Because sometimes that's the only record. Somebody's notes, and they may not be entirely legible, maybe. But there is a lot, I've noticed across archives in any form, there's the human part of it, which is there's always somebody who knows where that is.
Yes.
But that somebody won't be around forever.
Yes.
And that transfer of information rarely makes it to the next generation unless somebody worked with them for a long time. So some of this is stuck in people's heads. Some of it's on notes somewhere. Some of it's in a database. But actually being able to simplify all those things and then make them secure for the future. Yes. My favorite retention policy, I know everybody has different retention policies these days, and a lot of people think that, this idea of retaining your IRS record for 7 years, that's a long time. My favorite retention policy is that of the U.S. government, which is for the life of the republic. Seems cool. I hope that's a long time. But I do think people don't necessarily think of archives being 100 years old, but film is already 100 years old, right?
Yes.
And you probably have some very old assets in your archives, I'm assuming.
We do.
So it's an interesting conundrum. How do we know what's in an asset that's 100 years old if it wasn't really curated all that well? And who's looking? That's the other question. But I think based on the way things are going now with all the streaming channels out there, they need content. I'm sure people are looking to find more reasons to leverage the archives they have. Right?
100%. So, documentaries are being driven more and more by streaming, and that is where you go to find the unlabeled, uncatalogued stuff. That's where the interesting part is, right? Never before seen. You're going back to your broadcast side of it. When you said the domain knowledge either retires with a person or something, that is common. That is common. So on the artist side, there's your photographer who's been with you and whatever, and they only know where it is, and that's hard enough. On the music label industry side, there's handwritten, mixer notes on old analog assets and which version is it. There's also slang for people's names or the band's name, like abbreviations, and you're like, that's not actually the full name. You might miss that in a search. But on the broadcast side, I see it over and over again. There is a guy or guys who knew everything, and slowly they retire or move on, and that knowledge is no longer present. And you do need some toolkit to help reconstitute.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, one other aspect of this legacy knowledge, if you will, that often gets ignored is, what about the video engineers and the audio engineers who knew how to set the bias or the azimuth of a head on a magnetic playback system? That skill set is disappearing. Yeah. Right. And, I've been involved with conversations with a lot of audio engineers about how do we preserve how audio was recorded and played back, because the machines that was recorded on and played back on for film dubbing, things like that, had equalization curves. They had all of these things that factored into what it sounds like or how you interact with it, that if you would just pull something from a vault and throw it up on some modern equivalent of that older machine, it wouldn't sound right.
It's not going to,
right? And so there's this whole other set of information. I think it's interesting, but that's more of an oral history project, which maybe is, some future version of what we're doing.
We do track, when we do capture and digitization, all the adjustments on, like, that's in the operator notes.
Oh, that's great.
And that will go into the database for production and for smart vaults. So you can just pull up and see you can also see that it's about the condition of the asset when they received it, and stuff like that. So we're trying to preserve it, and we've been lucky in that there has been our one of our best engineers is a super young guy. He knows analog to digital, right?
That's great.
The single path. So we've been lucky in that we've been able to transfer the machine side of it, the playback side of it, let's say. But yeah, in general, that's the lost art.
Yeah. And we're running out of machines to play things back on, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you have an archive of cannibalized machines you got on eBay or something, right?
We just lost our privilege to order. We used to be the only ones at Iron Mountain that could order from eBay. Now we have to use a reseller to do it. But yeah,
Every archive I go to, the last stop of the tour is the room with all the cannibalized
stuff,
machines.
yeah.
And I'm like, why can't everybody just get together and work on this? Because we all need this gear. We can't be proprietary about it.
Right.
None of this stuff is manufactured anymore. So that must create some issues too, right?
Yes. So you always, if someone's dangling retiring equipment, I probably follow up on those more diligently than anything else.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh wait, I heard they have a pallet of stuff. Right. Let's at least check it out. There's that. There's a conversation about the few people who can still relap heads out there and what we can do about that. It's a thing, but we do the best we can. And if you want to, we can show you the graveyard. I mean, we bought it, I think at one point, an 18-wheeler full of 2 inches. I think we've got 3.
It's amazing.
Right. 3 that run.
The Library of Congress in the basement, it looks like the end of Indiana Jones, and there's just rows of machines all wrapped in plastic because they know someday I'm going to have to resurrect this thing.
Yep.
Now, flashing into the future, or the present and the future, you mentioned Vertex AI. So search is everything these days, right? When you have these bigger and bigger archives. And, we've been talking with you about the semantic search side of things, this ability to be able to search content where there is no metadata or no meaningful metadata, and that it doesn't involve tagging. So can you talk a little bit about how that transforms this experience of
it's revolutionary, just plain and simple. First of all, it creates a groundswell of interest, but a tremendous amount of usage. But the idea that it doesn't have to be tagged and put into a traditional database. As I mentioned, we had done some experiments in which we sent some stuff out for basic tagging and came back. And I think I might have mentioned it with you. If you ran traditional AI on this video, it would call us mammals, right? Great, that's bravo, but that no one's ever going to search for that, right? So we figured out we had to filter and do all these sorts of things, and then generative AI came in, and it's largely accurate, and it largely finds things that you need 1 or 2 tries, and it doesn't have to populate a giant database and filter out a whole bunch of stuff. And so that changes the game across the board on content use and finding content. It changes the equation on what you digitize, because now you may digitize more because you have the probability of finding some needles in a haystack. And it's just a general overall game changer. And again, it's kind of like Amex, right? Like back in the day, you're like, I wish someone would take a picture of this stuff. I wish I could see this asset.
Yeah.
GenAI is that for search, for at least in our world, right? So it really helps illuminate what's in there and help people find what they're using. And summarization too is just key to straight away. If you got an hour-long video, 2-hour-long video, I mean, not script-based, I'm sure it's very helpful there, but like event-based, concert-based, that is just super helpful.
Yeah, we have customers that are doing summarization on things like massive podcast archives, but they just want, and you can choose, through the Vertex tools, you can just say, give me a 300-word summary of this hour-long podcast, and it's as if someone whose opinion you trust had listened to it and told you about it.
Yeah.
It's got that level of detail in it. And it's interesting to me because databases in general tend to be more key value pair based. It's very sparse in terms of descriptive language. And I'm finding that people are more apt now to do a summarization of some content, whether it's just the audio track or they're doing a visual description, and save that into the database archive because it's easier to search that and makes more sense than a bunch of key value pairs.
Yes.
Because the other thing, I mean, the way I always equate the search experience these days with what goes on with AI is typically AI is really good at finding the nouns.
Yep.
And it's terrible at finding the verbs. And oftentimes people are looking for a thing doing a thing, right? So if you're cutting an action sequence and you need some vintage footage from the 70s or something, you might be looking for a Camaro that's going high speed through the streets of San Francisco and turning left. And you can try all sorts of keywords on that, but probably, if you're lucky, you're going to get a whole bunch of hits on Camaros, and then it's up to you to figure out which of these solves that problem. And now with the tools that are in the Vision Warehouse, it's basically inferring that verb that we've been missing all the time, or at least the context of what's in the shot. And I think using the natural language processing, which is, I'm guessing, is the vast majority of your customers who are interacting with this are using natural language processing, whether they call it that or not, right? They're not using Boolean search terms and things, right?
We have, for the last 10 years, had 3 ways to search. Keyword, database structure, pull down your category, or an advanced search where you could put in .mov, 16:9, stereo pair, and see what comes up, right? You read all these things. Number 1 search, keyword search. Number 1 search. Even though, to a certain extent, if you're a team and you organize by season, pulling down that season and then getting a subcategory of all the games is probably more efficient, you would still type in team name.
Right.
And that means that the user is just, they've basically been telling us from day one, we need a natural language search.
Right.
Just straight away.
Right.
And it does make a difference. And unless someone's properly tagged something, like just phishing, I think that's the one that's come up with Google a bunch, and I've tried it and it's true. Finding the verb phishing is a lot harder than just saying boat, rod, bait, right? That sort of thing. And then also, I agree with the approach of like, even if you do one thing, just do summarization. And if you need to just put that in a database, make it a large enough field, or parse it into, some way of breaking that out. But when you start to go into to keywords, excessive keywords, value pairs, and you're doing a simple search, you see the speed of the system bog down, which you're not seeing
Absolutely.
with a GenAI search.
Right. Yeah, because the tagging, I think, it also creates some very noisy metadata, right? Because if I've got an archive of tennis matches, I don't really need to know that there's a tennis racket in there, because I kind of knew that, right? I knew that there's a tennis ball and a ref and a court.
Yeah.
Those are not at all interesting or valuable to the grander scheme of things. And so I do think, and I'm wondering if this has happened at all with your customers, but one of the things that's sometimes hard for people to get their head around is that by using something like semantic search through Vision Warehouse, you're not getting a list of everything that's in there. What you're getting is the ability to ask for anything that's in there, and if it's there, it'll surface it.
Yep.
Has that presented any challenges yet with people, or is it still early to know?
I mean, the example you gave, racket, we can give you for horses. We ran, through the tagging process, an equestrian event, and it told us there were horses there a lot.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I was like, I don't think we need like 450 references to the horses, right? They're there. So yeah, and then you nailed it. I mean, that's basically that's the issue. It was, when you start off in the old days, when I started off and I logged footage, like finding the key component or descriptor about a take.
Yes.
Right. Especially on like a video shoot or indie, like that was an art, and you did it, and some of you were good at it and some of you were bad at it, and that would help the director get to where they needed, or the editor get to where they're needed. But now Vision Warehouse will get you there a lot faster, right? You could type in, so you could type in a set of camera originals, unedited footage, find me each take where someone says line, give me my line, right? Now you got a whole bunch of great outtakes, right? You could type in anytime someone shouts cut, because it was so just like those are the types of things you can get that you couldn't get from just a tag.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's interesting you mention that, because one of the use cases that we discovered, I was talking with a friend of mine who's a camera operator and was subbing on a reality show on TV here in LA, and I was just asking, so I'm just curious, how much do you shoot in an episode, for 1 hour show? And this particular show he was on, I can't name names right now, but was a 4,000 to 1 shooting ratio.
Holy.
So for every finished hour, they had 4,000 hours of material. Right. And so I said, well, how do they watch the dailies? And they don't. Yeah. There's too much. Yeah. Every week, you'd have to go through 4,000 hours? How can a human do that? How can humans do that? So what's interesting is a use case where, and in that case, a lot of this is, they have story editors who are looking through the footage just to try and find a story or something that might be perceived as a story. Right. Let's find some conflict and make it look like they really are fighting over this, or they're happy about this, whatever it is. Right. And so using Vision Warehouse has become a tool to be able to find the thing that you hope is in there, because you don't know.
Exactly.
Because no one has curated, no one's had time to look at it. So it's a fascinating thing, and I do think it's starting to give people some advantage and some possibilities that they didn't have in the past, which I think is great. And the ability to really figure out why they should be paying attention to their archive, because so many archives sit static, right?
Yeah.
And this has made things more dynamic. So any thoughts for where the next generation of Smart Vault might go?
Well, we're waiting to see what you guys develop, partially. But I think that we're just seeing the widespread adoption of it. So I suspect we'll learn a few things from the people who are using it. But where I think it's going to go is suggestive, like composition. So I own a certain amount of content, and I want to say, hey, find me, something based on this sentiment analysis,
Right.
this, time of day, this location, and it can give you basically the elements that you need for a rough cut. I think that will eventually be in it. There will be an agent. There will be a conversational agent. There will be something that might see your work for the day and say, have you thought about these guys over here? Because you've been been looking, it seems to be, for black and white, stills from 1973. These ones just haven't shown up in your search yet.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing I think will happen. I think in the collaborative space, you can use an agent or these tools so you and I could say, okay, for this spring, whatever project we're doing for the company, I think, these are the ones, hey, go find more and present them back to us, that sort of thing. I think that's where the future is. But we're really just enjoying the freedom and the depth of knowledge that comes from generative AI versus the reason why Smart Vault even has its place in the world, besides its security offering and the redundancy and all that stuff, is that we've really gone through the effort to personalize that search experience when we didn't have these tools baked in.
Right.
So now we're really just enjoying the effort. We still go through that effort, but now it's augmented by this really spectacular service, like by Vision Warehouse. So that part is what we're enjoying right now. But I do think the kind of, like, you were here, these are the top 10 things that your group is trending on, that sort of stuff. We'll start to help out with collaboration tools, or there's this has come to us, the desire to only use material that you fully own the licenses to.
Very important.
Comes back over and over again. So it's even less about finding the verb and more about finding about the stuff I own.
Yep.
Especially with respect to music licenses. That is more near term, I think, more than anything else.
That's fantastic. Well, I personally want to thank you, because I really appreciate your persistence on this. I know how passionate you've been about this, not only personally, but your team. And so Google Cloud is really thrilled at this opportunity that we've created together, and
Thank you.
looking forward to people doing this. So again, thank you for your persistence.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Yeah, the team has done it.
Thank you all for hanging out with us.
Yeah.